The Sacrifices of Ruqayyah are a tale of faith and endurance. The house of Prophet Muhammad was filled with an air of sorrow and hope. The recent loss of Qasim had left Hazrat Khadija in deep grief, but the birth of their daughter, Ruqayyah brought a newfound joy. When the Prophet held his daughter for the first time, he whispered prayers over her, naming her Ruqayyah, meaning one who rises, influences, and inspires. From a young age, Ruqayyah carried a grace and dignity that reminded many of Hadrat Maryam as. Her presence was soft yet powerful, and her kindness touched the hearts of those around her. But she did not know that her life, much like her father's, would be one of trials and sacrifices. A marriage that never was. It was a day of mixed emotions when Abu Talib came with a marriage proposal from Abu Lahab's family. Ruqayyah and her sister, Kulthum were betrothed to the sons of Abu Lahab. Though their hearts hesitated, they obeyed their father's decision, trusting in Allah's wisdom. However, fate had something else in store. When the revelation of Surah Al-Masad condemned Abu Lahab and his wife, hatred filled their hearts. To humiliate the Prophet Abu Lahab forced his sons to divorce Ruqayyah and Kulthum. What seemed like a dishonor to the world was, in reality, a divine mercy. Ruqayyah was saved from a life of cruelty. She returned to her father's home, not as a broken woman, but as a believer who saw Allah's wisdom in every trial. A new beginning with Uthman Among the noblemen of Quraysh, Uthman ibn Affan was known for his kindness, generosity, and piety. When he learned of Ruqayyah's fate, his heart ached with regret. Why had he not married her before? One night, his aunt came to him with a dream. "O Uthman," she said, "I saw you under the shade of the moon, married to a woman of great nobility." The next day, Prophet Muhammad himself proposed the hand of Ruqayyah for Uthman. It was a union that brought joy, but also the rage of the Quraysh. They saw this marriage as another step in strengthening Islam. Persecution against Muslims increased. The pain of Hijrat, the oppression in Mecca grew unbearable. When the Prophet allowed his followers to migrate to Abyssinia, Ruqayyah and Uthman were among the first to leave. The journey was grueling. Ruqayyah fell ill along the way, and to make matters worse, she suffered a miscarriage. Uthman cared for her, wiping away her tears, reminding her of the patience of the righteous. In Abyssinia, they found temporary peace, but the rumors that Quraysh had accepted Islam reached them. With hopeful hearts, they began their journey back to Mecca, only to find that it was a lie. The persecution was worse than before. In the midst of it all, Ruqayyah's heart shattered with another loss. Her mother, Khadija had passed away. Her father, though the messenger of Allah, stood alone in grief. Ruqayyah wept beside him, yet she remained steadfast, reminding herself that this world was never meant for comfort. The two migrations and a mother's pain. When the call for Hijrat to Medina was given, Ruqayyah and Uthman migrated again, earning the honor of being part of both migrations in Islamic history. In Medina, their home was filled with joy when Ruqayyah gave birth to a son, Abdullah. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. But life had its own plans. One tragic afternoon, a rooster pecked Abdullah's face, leading to an infection. Ruqayyah spent sleepless nights by his side, praying, pleading, holding on to hope. But Allah willed otherwise. Abdullah passed away in her arms. This was her ultimate test. She had lost her mother, left her home twice, suffered a miscarriage, and now she buried her only child. Yet she never lost faith. The final goodbye. As the Battle of Badr approached, Ruqayyah fell gravely ill. Fever consumed her frail body, yet her lips moved in silent prayer. The Prophet commanded Uthman to stay by her side. "You will fight a different battle," he said. On the day of Badr's victory, Medina witnessed a loss. Ruqayyah the daughter of the Prophet, the wife of Uthman, the mother of Abdullah, breathed her last. She was only 22 or 23 years old. Her body was washed by Amen, and as she was laid to rest in Jannat al-Baqi, the Prophet held his grieving son-in-law and said, "Allah has written a place for her in Jannah." Her legacy lives on. Hazrat Ruqayyah R.A. was a woman of grace, endurance, and unwavering faith. She was a daughter who supported her father, a wife who stood by her husband, and a believer who never let grief shake her trust in Allah. Her story teaches us that life is not about worldly comfort, but about patience in the face of trials. Her sacrifices remind us that the path to Jannah is paved with hardship, but the reward is eternal. May Allah be pleased with her and grant us the strength to follow her path. Ameen. Ruqayyah, R.A. the light after sorrow. The air in the house of Prophet Muhammad was heavy with silence. The loss of little Qasim had left an emptiness that even time could not erase. Hazrat Khadija, R.A., mourned in quiet prayers, her heart aching for the child she had lost. But Allah's mercy is vast, and just 1 year after Qasim's passing, a new light entered their home. A daughter is born. One serene morning in Mecca, as the golden sun rose over the sand dunes, the cries of a newborn filled the air. It was a girl. Tears welled up in Khadija's, R.A., eyes as she held her daughter close. She looked at her husband, the messenger of Allah, whose eyes were filled with gratitude. The sorrow of losing Qasim had been deep, but this child, this precious little soul, was a sign of hope. The Prophet held his daughter in his arms, whispering prayers over her. She will be named Ruqayyah, he said softly. The one who rises, the one who inspires. At that moment, no one could have imagined how true those words would be. A childhood of love and wisdom. Ruqayyah, R.A., was different from other children. There was a grace in her even as a baby, a quiet nobility that reflected her parents' character. She was nursed by Salma, the loyal servant of Hazrat Sophia, R.A., the Prophet's aunt. Salma often remarked how gentle and peaceful Ruqayyah was, never crying without reason, always observing the world with deep, thoughtful eyes. As she grew older, her bond with her father became special. He would hold her hand while walking through the streets of Mecca, teaching her kindness, patience, and the importance of truth. Unlike other Qurayshi children who were raised with pride and arrogance, Ruqayyah and her siblings were raised with humility and compassion. Their mother, Hazrat Khadija, R.A., would remind them daily, wealth does not make a person great. It is their character and faith that truly matter. A father's love and a community's scorn. Although Ruqayyah, R.A., was cherished in her home, the outside world was cruel. Mecca was a land where daughters were often buried alive, where women were seen as burdens rather than blessings. The Quraysh would mock the Prophet saying, "He has no sons to carry his name." But the Prophet never let their words affect his love for his daughters. He would stand up whenever Ruqayyah entered the room, hold her in his lap, and tell her how precious she was. One day, as a young Ruqayyah played near the Kaaba, she overheard a group of Qurayshi men laughing. "Look at Muhammad," one sneered. "All he has are daughters." Her small hands clenched into fists, and she ran home, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Baba, why do they say this?" she asked, her voice shaking. The Prophet knelt before her, wiping her tears. "Because they do not understand," he said gently. "A daughter is a mercy from Allah, and you, my Ruqayyah, are among his greatest blessings." Her heart swelled with pride. She knew then that she was not just any child. She was the daughter of a prophet, and her life had a purpose, a future unknown. The years passed and Ruqayyah, R.A., grew into a young woman of grace and dignity. She learned from her mother's wisdom, from her father's strength, and from the trials that came with being a part of a prophetic household. But life had trials waiting for her. Soon, a marriage proposal would come, one that would lead her into a family of cruelty and hatred. A storm of hardship was on the horizon, and Ruqayyah, R.A., would have to face it with the strength of her faith. She did not yet know it, but her life would become a story of patience, sacrifice, and unshakable belief in Allah. And her name, the one who rises, would become a reflection of her destiny, a test of faith, the unseen mercy. The quiet of the night settled over Mecca, but inside the home of the Prophet there was an air of unease. Ruqayyah, R.A., and her younger sister, Kulthum, R.A., sat beside their mother, their eyes reflecting uncertainty. The news had come earlier that evening, a marriage proposal from Abu Lahab's family. Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle, had brought the proposal himself. Utbah and Utaybah, the sons of Abu Lahab, were to be wed to the daughters of Muhammad SAW. It was a match that seemed politically wise. Abu Lahab was a man of power in Quraysh, and his wealth and influence could have provided security. Yet, something felt wrong. A father's dilemma. The Prophet SAW never forced his daughters into anything. His love for them was unlike the harsh traditions of Mecca, where daughters were mere burdens. That night, he sat with Ruqayyah and Kulthum, his voice gentle but serious. "My daughters, this proposal has come, but the choice is yours." Ruqayyah, R.A., looked down at her hands. She knew the expectations of society, the pressure of keeping peace within the Quraysh. Her heart did not desire Utbah, but how could she refuse when the entire family was watching? After a moment she whispered, "Baba, if this is what is best, we accept." Her sister nodded in agreement. The Prophet placed a reassuring hand on theirs, though a flicker of sadness passed through his eyes. A father knows when his daughters are not happy. A marriage that was never meant to be. Preparations began, and the engagement was announced. The Quraysh took it as a sign of the Prophet's submission to their traditions. But fate had other plans. As time passed, Ruqayyah noticed something unsettling about her future in-laws. Abu Lahab and his wife Jamil carried a hatred for her father that burned deeper than anything she had seen. One evening, as she and Kulthum visited their future home, they overheard whispers between Abu Lahab and his wife. "This Muhammad, Jamil spat, thinks his daughters will bring honor to our family? I will make their lives miserable." Ruqayyah felt a chill run down her spine. She clutched her sister's hand and led her away. Their future in this house was already dark, and the marriage had not even begun. The revelation that changed everything. One day, the air in Mecca shifted. A revelation had come down, Surah Al-Masad. The words echoed through the streets. "Perish the hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he." Abu Lahab's face turned red with fury. He had been publicly condemned in the words of Allah himself. The anger in his home was uncontrollable. Jamil raged, her eyes burning with hatred. "I will not have the daughters of Muhammad in my family. They are cursed," she shrieked. That very night, Abu Lahab stormed into his son's rooms. "Divorce them," he ordered, his voice thunderous. Utbah and Utaybah, who had no will of their own, obeyed. A blessing in disguise. When Ruqayyah R.A. and Kulthum R.A. were told of the divorce, the world around them blurred. Had they been humiliated? Would society mock them? They walked back to their father's home, unsure of what awaited them. But when they stepped inside, they were not met with shame. Instead, the Prophet smiled. "Allah has saved you from an oppressive home," he said, his voice filled with relief. Ruqayyah exhaled, and for the first time in months, she felt light. She realized then that what had seemed like a curse was actually a divine mercy. Allah had protected them from a life of cruelty. The unseen future. Though the storm had passed, Ruqayyah, R.A., did not know what lay ahead. Would she find love? Would her heart ever be at peace? Little did she know, across Mecca, there was a man of kindness and nobility, who would soon ask for her hand. A man named Uthman ibn Affan. Her story was not over. It had only just begun. A love written in the heavens. The streets of Mecca whispered with rumors. Ruqayyah R.A., the daughter of Muhammad was divorced. Some mocked her misfortune, while others pitied her. But no one knew that Allah was preparing something greater for her, a love purer than she had imagined. A man of honor and regret. Across the city, Uthman ibn Affan, R.A., sat in deep thought. He had always been a man of nobility, handsome, wealthy, and well-respected. But unlike the arrogant chiefs of Quraysh, he was known for his humility and generosity. One evening, as he sat with his aunt, she spoke words that would remain in his heart forever. "Oh, Uthman, I had a dream." "What did you see?" he asked. "I saw you marrying a woman of great honor, a woman whose light would spread across the world." Uthman, R.A., smiled softly but said nothing. A noble woman? Who could she be? But deep inside, his heart already held a name, Ruqayyah bint Muhammad. He had admired her from afar, but fate had led her into the hands of another. Now she was free again, and for the first time, he felt the weight of regret. Why had he not asked for her hand sooner? A proposal like no other. Days passed, and whispers of Ruqayyah's R.A. divorce faded into the winds. Yet, her heart remained uncertain. Would she ever find a man who could match the kindness of her father? Someone who would love her for who she was, not for the status she carried? One evening, as she sat beside her father, he spoke with a knowing smile. Ruqayyah, will you think of Uthman ibn Affan? Her cheeks flushed. Uthman? The noble merchant? The man known for his generosity and purity? She lowered her gaze. He is a man of honor. The prophet saw, smiled. Then would you accept his hand in marriage? Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Had Allah destined her for someone as kind as Uthman? She nodded softly, her lips forming a small smile. And that night, under the watchful stars of Mecca, the union of Ruqayyah and Uthman was arranged. A marriage that shook the Quraysh. The news spread like wildfire. The daughter of Muhammad was now married to Uthman ibn Affan, a man of nobility, but also a follower of Islam. The Quraysh were furious. First, Muhammad refuses our idols, and now our own Uthman marries into his family, they grumbled. Some of them approached Uthman. You could have married any woman of Quraysh. Why choose the daughter of Muhammad? Uthman's R.A. eyes burned with quiet defiance. Because she is the daughter of a prophet. Then we will make your life miserable, they warned. And they did. Uthman's businesses suffered, his wealth was threatened, and his own relatives turned against him. But he did not care. He had Ruqayyah, and he had his faith. No amount of persecution could take that away. A love that grew stronger. Despite the hardships, Ruqayyah R.A. found herself falling deeper in love with Uthman R.A. He was not just kind. He was gentle with her, always putting her needs before his own. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset over Mecca, she turned to him. Are you happy, Uthman? He smiled. Happiness is in the small moments, Ruqayyah. And with you, every moment feels complete. She felt warmth spread through her heart. Perhaps, after all the struggles, Allah had written this happiness for her. The storm ahead. But their journey was far from over. The persecution against the Muslims was increasing. The Quraysh grew crueler, and soon, the Prophet would give an order that would change their lives forever. A migration. Would Ruqayyah and Uthman be able to withstand the trials ahead? Would their love survive the tests of faith and sacrifice? Only time would tell. A journey of love and loss. The streets of Mecca had become a prison. The cries of tortured Muslims filled the air. The Quraysh had made life unbearable for those who followed the message of Islam. Ruqayyah R.A. and Uthman R.A. had endured so much. His businesses were sabotaged, their home was no longer safe, and whispers of harm reached their ears daily. One night, a message arrived from the Prophet The believers are to leave for Abyssinia. There, a just king will give us refuge. Ruqayyah R.A. clutched Uthman's R.A. hand. Leave Mecca? The land of their ancestors? Their home? But she saw the determination in her husband's eyes. This is our test, Ruqayyah. Will you stand by me? She nodded. Wherever he went, she would go. For the sake of Allah, they would leave behind everything. The treacherous journey. The night of their departure was filled with whispers and hurried steps. They moved in the shadows, joining a small group of Muslims. Every rustling sound felt like an enemy approaching. As they neared the edge of the city, Ruqayyah felt her heart race. Would the Quraysh find them? Would they be dragged back? Suddenly, a voice called from behind. Stop them. Fear shot through Ruqayyah's veins. They had been discovered. The group ran. Through the darkened hills across the rough sands. Ruqayyah's breath came in sharp gasps, but she didn't stop. Finally, they reached the shore. The ship to Abyssinia was waiting. Uthman R.A. helped Ruqayyah onto the wooden deck. And as the sails lifted, they watched Mecca fade into the horizon. They had escaped. But at what cost? A new life in a foreign land. Abyssinia was nothing like Mecca. The air smelled of unfamiliar spices, the language was strange, and the faces around them were foreign. But there was peace. For the first time in months, Ruqayyah could step outside without fear. King Negus, the ruler of Abyssinia, welcomed the Muslims. "You are safe here," he declared. It felt like a new beginning. The greatest joy, the deepest sorrow. Days turned into months, and in their new home, Ruqayyah's heart swelled with happiness. She was carrying a child. Uthman's joy knew no bounds. A child. Ruqayyah, this is a blessing beyond words. The little room they lived in was filled with dreams, of laughter, of a small hand holding theirs, of a future free from fear. But fate had its own plans. One night, Ruqayyah, awoke with a sharp pain in her stomach. She gasped, clutching her abdomen. Something was wrong. Uthman, was at her side in an instant. "Ruqayyah, what is it?" Pain tore through her body. Tears streamed down her face. She knew. By morning, the child was gone. A husband's unwavering love. Ruqayyah, lay on the thin mattress, her body weak, her heart shattered. The child she had dreamed of holding in her arms was never meant to be. She turned away, silent tears soaking the pillow. "I have failed, Uthman." Uthman, sat beside her, his voice breaking. "No, Ruqayyah, never say that." He held her hand gently, his grip firm yet tender. "Allah has a greater plan for us. Do not lose hope." But Ruqayyah, felt herself slipping into darkness. Her health, once strong, began to decline. She was weaker than before, quieter, lost in her own sorrow. And through it all, Uthman, never left her side. He fed her when she was too tired to eat. He whispered words of comfort when she woke from restless dreams. And when she cried silently in the middle of the night, he held her, never letting go. A faint light in the darkness. News arrived from Mecca. A rumor that Quraysh had softened, that they were accepting Islam. Had the trials ended? Could they return home? A flicker of hope reignited in Ruqayyah's heart. Perhaps this suffering had not been in vain. And so, with heavy hearts but renewed faith, Ruqayyah, and Uthman, prepared for the journey back home. But little did they know, the greatest trials were yet to come. The journey home, love, loss, and new beginnings. The morning sun cast golden rays over the Red Sea as Ruqayyah, and Uthman, stood on the deck of the ship, gazing towards the horizon. Mecca was calling them back. The news had spread quickly. The Quraysh had softened, and many had accepted Islam. The years of persecution were over. "Do you think it's true?" Ruqayyah, whispered, hope flickering in her eyes. Uthman, gently squeezed her hand. "I pray it is. But whatever we find, we will face it together." As the ship moved closer to Mecca shores, Ruqayyah, felt something she had not felt in years, a longing for home. But fate had one more test waiting for her. A cruel reality. The moment they stepped into Mecca, the truth hit them like a storm. The Quraysh had not changed. The so-called peace was a lie. Muslims were still being tortured. The streets still echoed with their cries. Ruqayyah, looked at Uthman, her heart sinking. They had left the safety of Abyssinia for this? And then came the news that shattered her soul. Her mother, Khadijah, was gone. A mother's absence. Ruqayyah, stood in the quiet home where her mother had once lived. Every corner carried her presence. She could almost hear her voice, feel her gentle hands brushing against her hair, smell the faint scent of the perfume she used to wear. Tears welled in her eyes. "I should have been here," she whispered. "I should have been by her side." Her father, Prophet Muhammad placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "She was proud of you, Ruqayyah. She knew you were fulfilling Allah's command." Ruqayyah, closed her eyes, grief washing over her. Her mother had been her pillar, her safe place. And now that place was empty. A second migration, leaving home once more. As the days passed, persecution in Mecca worsened. One by one, Muslims began leaving for a new land, Medina. The Prophet gave his companions permission to migrate, and soon Ruqayyah, R.A., and Uthman, R.A. knew it was time. But leaving Mecca this time felt different. The first time, they had left in fear. This time, they were leaving with faith. They traveled through scorching deserts, the weight of the journey pressing upon them. Ruqayyah, R.A., still weak from her past struggles, leaned on Uthman, R.A., for support. Each step was difficult, but their hearts remained strong. When they finally arrived in Medina, a sense of peace settled over them. For the first time in years, they were safe. And yet, as Ruqayyah, R.A., looked at the sky that night, she couldn't shake the feeling. Her journey was not yet over. Something was coming, a test greater than any she had faced before, and she would need all the strength she had left to face it. A mother's trial, love, loss, and strength. The city of Medina had become a sanctuary for the believers. For Ruqayyah, R.A., and Uthman, R.A., it was also a place of new beginnings. After years of struggle, leaving behind family, enduring exile, and grieving the loss of her beloved mother, Ruqayyah, R.A., finally had a reason to smile. Allah had blessed her with a son, Abdullah. The tiny infant filled their home with laughter. His cries were a melody Ruqayyah, R.A., had longed to hear. Her father, the Prophet Muhammad, often visited, holding his grandson close. He would kiss Abdullah's forehead and smile, his heart filled with love. He will grow up to be a strong man, inshallah, Uthman, R.A., said one evening, watching Ruqayyah, R.A., cradle their son. But fate had its own plans. A mother's worst fear. One morning, as the sun painted golden streaks across Medina's sky, Ruqayyah, R.A., heard a sharp cry. She rushed to find Abdullah trembling, his tiny face red with pain. A rooster had pecked him. It seemed like a small injury at first, but within hours his body burned with fever. His soft skin turned pale. His breathing grew weak. Ruqayyah, R.A., held him close, whispering prayers, her heart pounding with fear. Ya Allah, heal my son, she pleaded, pressing her lips to his forehead. Uthman, R.A., sat beside her, his hands trembling as he wiped away her tears. Days passed, but Abdullah's condition only worsened. The infection spread, stealing the life from his tiny body. And then, in the silence of one fateful night, his breathing slowed and stopped. The world around Ruqayyah, R.A., shattered. The weight of sorrow. The small grave in Jannat al-Baqi stood as a painful reminder of what she had lost. Her hands, once used to rocking her son to sleep, now trembled as they touched the cold earth. The grief was unbearable. Her heart felt hollow, her soul burdened by an agony no mother should ever endure. Her father, Prophet Muhammad, held her close. His eyes, filled with sorrow, reflected her pain. Sabr, my daughter, he whispered. Allah tests those he loves the most. Your son waits for you in Jannah. Ruqayyah, R.A., nodded, but deep inside, her body was breaking. A declining health. Days turned into weeks. Medina thrived, Islam flourished, but Ruqayyah, R.A., weakened. Her once bright eyes grew dull. Her laughter disappeared. Her health, already fragile from years of hardship, began to deteriorate rapidly. Uthman, R.A., refused to leave her side. He watched helplessly as she struggled with fever and exhaustion. One evening, as she lay resting, she reached for his hand. Her voice was barely a whisper. Do you think Abdullah will recognize me when I see him again? Uthman, R.A., swallowed the lump in his throat. Tears filled his eyes. He will run to you, Ruqayyah, he said. He will take your hand and never let go. A faint smile touched her lips. She closed her eyes, holding onto that thought. A reunion. One day. But deep down, Uthman, R.A., knew that day was coming sooner than he ever imagined. The final goodbye, a love tested by loss. The streets of Medina buzzed with anticipation. The first great battle between truth and falsehood was near, the Battle of Badr. Men prepared their swords, armor, and horses, ready to march for the sake of Allah. The air was thick with tension, but within the quiet walls of one home, another battle was being fought, one that required no weapons. Ruqayyah, R.A., lay weak on her bed, her body trembling with fever. Her once radiant face was now pale. Uthman, R.A., sat by her side, a damp cloth in his hand, gently pressing it against her burning forehead. His heart ached. He had fought many battles in life, leaving behind his home, enduring exile, burying their only son. But this battle, watching Ruqayyah slip away, powerless to stop it, was the hardest of all. A husband's dilemma. One evening, a messenger arrived. Uthman, the Prophet saw, has called for you. The army is preparing to leave for Badr. Uthman, R.A., looked at Ruqayyah, R.A. Her breaths were slow, heavy, labored. How could he leave her like this? Moments later, another message arrived. This time, from Prophet Muhammad saw himself. Stay with her, the Prophet instructed. Your place is here, beside your wife. Uthman, R.A., felt a mix of relief and sorrow. He had wanted to fight alongside his brothers, but Ruqayyah needed him more. So he stayed. Through the fever, through the nights of restless sleep, through the moments when her body shook with pain. And all the while he prayed, Ya Allah, if this is her test, give her strength. And if this is my test, give me patience. The final moments. The night before the battle, Medina was silent. The city of believers had emptied as warriors left for Badr. Only the sick, the elderly, and the children remained. Uthman, R.A., sat beside Ruqayyah, R.A., holding her fragile hands. She opened her eyes, a weak smile on her lips. Did my father leave? She whispered. Uthman, R.A., nodded. Yes, my love. But he wanted to be here. He wanted to hold your hand and tell you how much he loves you. Ruqayyah, R.A., closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. Tell him, I love him too. Her fingers tightened around Uthman's. And then, her grip loosened. A breath, a pause, a stillness. Uthman, R.A., felt the weight of the moment crash over him. His world, the woman who had shared his struggles, who had walked beside him through exile and pain, was gone. The messenger returns. Days later, Medina echoed with celebration. The Muslims had won the Battle of Badr. A rider galloped into the city, announcing victory. The people cheered, their voices filling the air. But Uthman, R.A., sat in silence. His victory had already been written, not on the battlefield, but in his home, where he had fought for patience, for love, for the strength to let go. The Prophet returned, his eyes searching for Ruqayyah, R.A. But before he could speak, he saw the sorrow in Uthman's face. He understood. Tears filled the Prophet's eyes. His beloved daughter was no more. He embraced Uthman, R.A., his voice heavy with grief. She waits for you in Jannah. This world was never meant for souls as pure as hers. And with that, the greatest comfort was given, a promise of reunion, a love that even death could not break. The eternal light of Ruqayyah, R.A. The streets of Medina were quieter now. The echoes of battle had faded, but in one home, a different kind of war had been fought, the battle of patience, loss, and unwavering faith. Uthman, R.A., sat alone. The house felt emptier than ever before. Ruqayyah, R.A., was gone, yet her presence lingered in every corner. In the neatly folded cloth she once wore, in the lingering scent of musk that still clung to the air. He had lost her, but had he really? A father's grief, a father's strength. The Prophet stood in the courtyard of Masjid al-Nabawi. His heart, though used to the weight of pain, felt a fresh wound. First Khadijah, R.A., his beloved wife. Now Ruqayyah, R.A., his gentle daughter. Yet, even in grief, he smiled. A companion, noticing his expression, asked, O Messenger of Allah, you smile even after such loss? The Prophet looked toward the sky. How can I not smile when I know she waits for us in Jannah? His words were not of despair, but of certainty. For Ruqayyah, R.A., had not been lost. She had simply gone ahead. The forgotten victory. As Medina celebrated the Muslims' victory at Badr, Uthman, R.A., felt a different kind of triumph. The triumph of faith. Yes, he had lost Ruqayyah, R.A. Yes, the pain of her absence was unbearable. But had she not taught him patience? Had she not shown him what it meant to endure, to trust in Allah even when life took everything away? And was that not the greatest victory of all? Her legacy lives on. Years passed. Islam grew stronger, its light spreading across the lands. One day, a young woman sat in the shade of a palm tree, listening to the stories of the prophets, saw family. She heard of Ruqayyah R.A., the daughter who had left behind wealth for faith, comfort for struggle, and life for Jannah. She wept. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. If Ruqayyah R.A. could endure, so could she. If Ruqayyah R.A. could hold on to faith through loss, so could we all. And just like that, her story lived on, not in books, not in monuments, but in the hearts of those who chose to walk the same path. The path of patience. The path of faith. The path that leads home. To Jannah. A final prayer. May Allah, SWT, grant Hazrat Ruqayyah R.A. the highest place in Jannat al-Firdaus. May her story continue to inspire hearts, strengthen faith, and remind us that every hardship is followed by ease. And may we too be reunited with our loved ones in the eternal gardens, where no sorrow, no loss, and no goodbyes exist. Ameen. Ruqayyah R.A. a light that never fades. The evening sky over Medina was painted in hues of orange and pink. A soft breeze whispered through the streets, carrying with it the echoes of prayers, of faith, of stories that would never be forgotten. Among those stories was hers. The story of Ruqayyah bint Muhammad R.A. A tale of love, sacrifice, endurance, and faith. A life of trials and triumphs. She was born in joy, but lived through pain. As a child, she had seen the warmth of her mother, Khadijah R.A., and the wisdom of her father, the Prophet SAW. She had once been a cherished daughter in a home full of love. But as time passed, she became a witness to the cruelty of the Quraysh, the pain of rejection, and the loneliness of exile. She had endured forced marriage, bitter divorce, the uncertainty of migration, and the crushing loss of her son. Yet she never faltered. Through every trial, she remained steadfast, and through every loss, her faith only grew stronger. A legacy etched in faith. She was more than a daughter, more than a wife, more than a mother. She was a beacon of light, a symbol of faith, an example for every believer to come. Her life whispered a truth that the world needed to hear. Even in hardship, hold on to Allah. For after every storm, there is light. The Prophet's tears, the Prophet's smile. When she passed away, the Prophet wept. A father had lost his daughter, but even in his grief, he smiled. When asked why, he said, "For she is not lost. She has simply gone ahead." He knew that Ruqayyah R.A. was waiting, not in this world, but in a far better place. A lesson for us all. Her story did not end with her passing, because her story is ours too. When we face loss, may we remember Ruqayyah R.A. When we feel alone, may we recall her patience. And when life tests our faith, may we hold on to Allah, just as she did. For in the end, those who trust in Allah never truly lose. They only move closer to their eternal home. The home where Ruqayyah R.A. now waits, in the gardens of Jannah, free from pain, free from sorrow. May we be among those who follow her path. Ameen.